Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Advanced Real Estate Investing Talk. For some of you who aren't aware, I do run two podcasts, and on the other podcast, there is some amazing content. I just wanted to try and share it between the channels. Maybe there's some people who'd be interested in the other channel as well. So anyway, without further ado, I want to introduce Darcy White and Aury and I.
Today, we will be discussing why should you or shouldn't you invest using a HELOC. So personally, I've never used a HELOC. But I've heard of people using credit cards. And I think as long as you have a solid exit plan to reimburse this expensive form of debt, but sometimes, we can get those offers, 12 months, 0% balance transfer with 2%. If you can do your rehab during that period of time and make sure that the bank you can sell, or that the bank is going to refinance, the seasoning period is no longer than this, then and if you've done a conservative underwriting and you have a good team lined up for the execution, then I think you could do that. But personally, I don't have experience with HELOC, but my general advice and thought and intuition would be make sure your underwriting is conservative, that you have the proper timelines to refinance out of it.
That's smart. No, I actually did that before COVID. I went and bought a house on my credit card, or a house on a credit card, and then refinanced it and paid off the credit card all under the year. And Bob's your uncle, right? As long as you can as long as you have a high enough credit limit to do it. So I was just talking to Darcy about this before we started, and about should you use a HELOC or not use a HELOC? And originally I started a whole list of all the downsides about why a HELOC isn't going to work out. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that, let's be completely frank here. Whenever I did my first couple properties in the US, I used a HELOC. So if I wouldn't have used the HELOC, how would I have done those properties? That's where you go, where is it? In all honesty, whenever I started in the US, I had my money that I had of actual money was tied up in Canadian properties. I didn't have cash. My cash was working, right? So I didn't have any money, right? Per se, I had equity and I had, in properties, but I didn't have any cash. How do you do this? How do you get started if you don't have any cash? Because you're going to need some cash somewhere, right? And we were talking, I think it was last week or the week before, and we were talking about you need to have proof of concept before you actually even start. So you need to start with something somehow. And unless you got a good buddy who's willing to take the ride with you on the first roller coaster, the first track that's ever been done, because the first one is the risky one, you're going to need something. You need something to get this, right?
I'd acknowledge, Glenn, too. I started with a homeowner's line of credit. Actually, my first purchase was 3 years worth of tax returns from CRA. I was so shamefully behind on my taxes. I knew they owed me money, but my first deal was when I finally got 3 years of tax returns and these 3 checks, almost 30 grand. I used that for my first purchase. And then the next one was the homeowner's line of credit. I mean, think of it. How would you save 50 grand in cash? I know a handful of people that have done it. My sister and brother-in-law, they bought their house cash. But that was back in the 90s and in Edmonton, where you could buy a house for, in modest 6 figures numbers. Yeah. So how'd you do it?
You talking to Aury or talking?
No, Glenn. Sorry, I interrupt, but I just want to say I did the same thing. I had to. You had to. Where else did you get cash?
Yeah. No. That's exactly it, right? So I used my line of credit. So there is some advantages to using your line of credit. So I'm going to go into those a little bit. So first of all, compared to using a loan from the bank, you got a lot less strings, which, you can do whatever you want to do with it, right? It's basically, it's as close to cash you can have, only you have payments on this cash, right? You can do nice, fast closings, right? So you want to be competitive taking on other people's offers, I can close really fast because I'm doing it all in, cash really, but it's not really cash. It's a line of credit, right? But it works the same as cash, right? So you can do cash purchases. You're not going to be qualifying for this. They're not checking your DSCR. They're not checking your debt coverage ratios. They're not checking nothing because there's nobody checking, right? So you don't have any points. You don't have any origination, any loan setup fees. There's a whole lot of perks to doing this, right? Because you're not dealing with all that junk, right? There's also opportunity costs. If you didn't use your line of credit, you're not, like, what's the cost of doing nothing? Right? There's the other side of that, right? There's always the cost of doing nothing. Other thing to think about is your line of credit. It's a bunch of equity that you have in your property. And whether you believe this or not, your return on your equity is zero, right? That money isn't working. By doing either a refinance or using a line of credit is a way to make your money work. That equity that's in your property, maybe I shouldn't call it money. The equity in your property, you can actually put it to work, right? But there is downsides to this, right? This is going to affect your future loans, right? This is going to affect your, what do they call it? Debt coverage ratio, debt service ratio, because now it shows you have a whole bunch of debt, because it shows up differently than if you were using a mortgage, right? But you can pay this back at any time. So if, like, you're doing like Aury said, and you have a plan, like you're doing a 3-month renovation and then a refi at month 6, sure, you could have this money paid back, and it's just a small amount of time that it's doing this, right? So like I said, when I started this, when I started thinking about this topic, I basically built out a list of why you shouldn't do it. And if you are the way I look at a line of credit now, or a home equity line of credit, is I think of it as trying to be politically correct with this, but oh crap money, right? It's if something goes wrong, you have money to bail yourself out. If you have a private loan, you need to pay them off. You could use that money to pay it off, make sure everything goes perfectly for your private lenders, and then in a month when the actual property closes, you can fix everything back. It smooths out some of the real estate stuff. So I don't use it anymore. I use it as available cash to make sure everything goes smoothly, right? But the hard part about this when you start is it's going to make you feel poor.
Yes.
Because a lot of times the payments for that are coming from you. It's going to come from like your 9-to-5 income is how you're making these payments. It's going to be tough. Like even think about myself, like when I started investing in the United States. So I'm getting paid cash flow in US currency. Am I bringing back that money every single month to make my payments for the home equity line of credit? It's tough, right? Ideally, you want to wait until the dollar's at the good spots, right? To move your money back and forth. You don't want to do, the banks love it for you to move money every single month, basically ride the exchange rate wherever it is. And it shows for them that, hey, this is how much profit there. So you can see them taking it back every single month. But honestly, I don't like doing that even to this day. I'd rather wait and pull a year's worth of salary when the dollar's like soaring high, right? And then I'll just live off of that for a year, and then I'll wait for another good time, right?
No, that's smart.
I don't want to deal with it, right? With whatever it's at a certain time, right? But it's tough to pay your bills because if you run like that, because a lot of times you're going, oh, I'm using my money in my bank account to pay this line of credit for this property that's in a different country, right? So the other thing about this, and I know if you're used to doing loans, you're going to say, well, you're going to have this on every loan, but you're going to personally guarantee this loan, right? Like it basically, right? That is on your home equity line of credit. Is the bank, if that property goes upside down, are they just going to forgive that home equity line of credit? Nope. That is tied to you. You stop making your payments, I'm sure they'll start repoing vehicles and doing all the stuff because it's a personal loan, right? It's on you, right? So you're taking that. It's not a non-recourse loan. It's nothing like that. It's coming from you. So you were personally responsible for this, right? And because of this, well, maybe I'll go back a bit. Remember at the start when I was talking about there's no qualifying, you don't have to deal with debt service ratios. You don't have to worry about this. There is nobody looking over your shoulder to help you as well. Then no one's going to tell you that you're buying something that's garbage. No one's going to tell you it doesn't meet their loan criteria because it's garbage. So people, honestly, when they have cash, in a lot of cases, get lazy and they just buy stuff that isn't actually a really good deal. They'll buy stuff that's pretty good, gives them a bit of cash flow, hit some numbers, but they don't dig in, right? If you have investors, you have to make sure you hit all these numbers, right? So you can get lazy with this. You can make mistakes. You can have wrong rent comps because no one's checked them. The lender didn't check them. You can have wrong ARVs because no lenders checked this. And, it's the Wild West. Your responsibility is to doing this yourself, right? And if you don't do it, the only person that's going to suffer is you, right? Yeah. Whereas you have someone to look over, right? You have someone to give permission, right? Whereas right now, you're giving permission to yourself to go use this, right? So, hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
You would say, I think it's worth picking up here that a fixed term instrument, a fixed mortgage from a bank that comes with these guidelines and references and a bunch of work of people scrutinizing it is a reflection of the way they perceive the liability or the risk, right? So that you'll get a lower interest rate potentially because they built in a whole lot of assumptions about security and risk. Whereas with your line of credit, as Glenn says, it's going to float and you're just going to do what you do. So if you're not covering your mortgage interest payments or your mortgage coverage ratio is 1 or 1.1, those are numbers that banks will not consider. 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, depending on the risk, location, industry, those are more realistic numbers. And they want to make sure you well exceed the coverage because they know you're going to pay yourself and feed your family and starve them if it comes down to it. Yep. So they want to make sure you can feed your family first or feed them first and then your family.
Yeah, they're going to cover their butt, which is your butt.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think there's to go back to what I think where Glenn opened there, because I spent some time thinking about that, the when and the where and the why you might use this. When you should use it is when you must. If there's such a great deal and you're so confident about it and you can't find money any other way, then you must. And I've done that. What we said earlier, where are you going to find $50 or $100 or $150,000 in investment capital? I mean, that takes an extraordinary amount of discipline and time to save. So it does accrue in your house. A compression of local cap rates or valuation raising of homes of 14% 3 years in a row, and all of a sudden you've created $80,000 or $90,000 worth of value in your home. That's not you. That's the whole market doing it, and that's an enormous amount of leverage, and it creates wealth. That's where most people are finding these homeowners' line of credits in market forces that are beyond their control that put wealth in their lap if they can access it safely. Why should you use it when there's no other option? Like if this is the option and this is the deal and you're certain of it, it'd be hard to turn down a really great deal just for a philosophy. So my brother and I used our homeowners line of credits to buy a 17-unit apartment out of receivership in Southern Ontario. It was $464,000 plus closing costs. And we each put down 50% of the required cost and closing costs with our lines of credit. We could do that because we had lines of credit on our private homes and we just paid it out. And that means we could buy it out of the Mississauga something Croatian credit unions clutches for cash, and we closed simply in 3 days with a lawyer. It was really simple, too easy to buy 17 units of misery. And then we worked on it for 9 years to make it worth 1.1 million. we did it because we must. We were compelled to do it because we thought this is a great deal and get us into the market. And that's why and how we did it. But yeah, it made sense. And we replaced that financing within 2 years with a CMHC insured mortgage from a top 5 bank. It was a CIBC for $650,000. So we realized significant return of our capital, the monies we put in, and replaced it with secured money and put our homeowners line of credits back intact, brought them back down to zero.
So Darcy, was that the plan from the start? Is that you were going to move it into other financing in the 2-year mark?
Yeah. The only uncertainty was how fast we could get it into the hands of another bank. And because it's a small property in a tertiary market, an older building, we had a lot of work to do. We were ready with a stabilized building, full, renovated, ready to go within 16 months. But it took another almost year to get banks interested in something, firstly, that small and in that market. It was just harder. It turned the wheel slower. So it sat on our lines of credit. And in those times, line of credits, we had prime minus. Right now, people are looking at prime plus 1.5 and prime sitting at 6.7. So you might be looking at 7.89, almost 8% if you use your homeowner line of credit right now. You may get somewhere between 50 to 80% of your home's value based on your credit rating, but that's fairly expensive money. So you got to build into your plan, if you're attempting to use this, a return that's going to cover that. That's a fairly aggressive play right now. Are you going to find something that's going to produce cash flow quickly to cover 18 months to 2 years of operational shortfalls while you turn it around? That might suggest you're looking at a flip or a very distressed property, or you're only putting some of your money in from this source and you're bringing it from somewhere else.
Was your underwriting paying your own credit or paying your lines of credit? Was that part of the underwriting?
Yep. Yeah. So we calculated in 16 to 18 months of paying our interest.
Yeah.
And we did it. We paid it out of our money that's, like Glenn said, our household budget. So we were eating oatmeal for another year. You know, my kids laughed. Dad, were we poor? Why did we eat oatmeal for 16 years?
I thought you were being sarcastic. I didn't think you were being literal.
No, I'm dead serious. I've traumatized them. It's like 11 cents a serving. You can get a high glycemic, slow releasing meal out of oatmeal for like 11 cents a serving. You can tart it up with some raisins and almonds and brown sugar or syrup, but it's still super cheap. And they just laugh. This is part of our family's lore that we did this because we had to. You know, we could have done it differently.
I think we lost Darcy, but Aury, I think we were basically wrapping this up anyway. You may as well take us home. We'll find Darcy and we'll have a conversation next week with him.
Yeah, I think thank you everybody for tuning in, and that's the beauty of real estate investing. You know, so many stories, or even entrepreneurship. So many stories of people starting with credit card debt, nothing. But as long as you have your numbers aligned, there is a way. When there is a will, there is a way. I think that's the lesson from what we've discussed today. Thank you everybody for tuning in. If you have any question you'd like us to answer on the show, please email us at advancedreitalk@gmail.com, advancedreitalk@gmail.com. See you next week.
Yeah, everybody.
Thanks everyone.
That was a nice video. Bye.